In a government research centre, a series of urgent experiments are taking place. A new material is being tested, one which could protect astronauts against radiation in space. A technician, wearing a lab coat over his ordinary clothes, enters the lead-lined chamber to check some data, unaware that a radiation-suited figure is lurking outside in the control area. Suddenly, the intruder slams the chamber door and locks the technician in. The figure moves to the controls and blasts the technician with deadly radiation.
Dragon's Field, written by Terence Feely, produced by Leonard White, and directed by Peter Hammond.
John Steed is at the research centre to investigate the incident, which has left the technician critically ill with radiation poisoning. Steed peruses some of the staff files whilst discussing the case with Dr. Reddington, the studious head scientist in charge of the centre. Together, they examine an anti-radiation suit, similar to the one the mysterious attacker was wearing. There is no other clue to the assailant's identity, but Steve feels it is likely to be someone working at the centre. Outside Reddington's office, two other scientists, Susan Summers and Dr. Jack Alford, are working in the laboratory. Beyond their professional association, the pair are also romantically involved. However, things are not going very well with their relationship, and as they argue, they are watched with interest by the centre's rather unpopular security officer, Saunders. A little while later, Steed is shown the workings of the laboratory by Dr. Reddington and his assistant, Lisa Strauss. Lisa shows Steed how the scientists handle radioactive materials with remote grab arms that operate within the lead-lined chamber. From a distance, Susan Summers is furtively monitoring their activity. Meanwhile, Saunders warns Dr. Alford about his relationship with Susan. He suspects she was involved in the incident, but as yet has no hard evidence. Alford takes this badly and confides in Susan that Saunders appears not to approve of their fraternising. Susan responds by saying the security chief is simply jealous. Lisa shows Steed around the rest of the laboratory and introduces him to Susan, who seems just as shocked by the accident as the others. Steed is puzzled. Clues to the identity of the culprit are proving somewhat elusive. Susan reveals to Steed that her work period is over. She leaves for the shower room to wash, with Lisa following close behind. Noting an air of friction between the two women, Steed tails them at a safe distance and overhears them quarrelling. Susan contends that Lisa is compromising the work of the centre with her emotional obsession with Dr. Reddington. Lisa angrily refutes the accusation. She would never allow her feelings to jeopardise the research. Later, Dr. Alford is inside the radiation chamber, removing dangerous material from a containment cabinet. He is standing in front of the remote grab arms, unaware he is being observed. Outside, a person in a protective suit operates the grab arms and uses them to attempt to strangle Alford. Later, some hours after Steed has found the semi-conscious Alford, he talks to Saunders in the security chief's office. Alford has survived the assault and has been hospitalised. Unfortunately for Steed and Saunders, the attacker remains unidentified. Saunders, however, has his own private theories as to whom he believes is responsible for the trouble. As Steed is talking to Saunders, the telephone rings. It is one of Steed's superiors, 115, who is inquiring about his progress on the case. 115 impresses on Steed the need for urgency. The government cannot afford any further delays to this project. Steed leaves Saunders, who has intimated that he intends to pursue his own line of inquiry. The security officer has eavesdropped on coded messages from the saboteur to a group outside the laboratory. Saunders has managed to crack the code and takes the opportunity to contact the group, posing as another person interested in halting the program. He is told to go to a local public house, where he will be met by somebody from the group. Meanwhile, Steed has decided to take another approach to the investigation. He agrees to take part in a monitoring experiment being run by Dr. Reddington and Lisa. Steed is wired up to sensors which will monitor his vital signs. Steed has been assured that the experiment will be perfectly safe, and he secretly believes that his participation may possibly bring the saboteur out into the open. The experiment begins, but it soon becomes clear from Steed's reactions that all is not well. As Lisa and another technician watch, Steed gasps in pain and passes out. Lisa quickly stops the experiment and rushes in to help the semi-conscious Steed. Upon investigation, she discovers the equipment has been tampered with. The saboteur has struck again. Saunders arrives at the pub and is met by two imposing taciturn men. Despite his attempts to convince them of his desire to help the saboteurs, Saunders is unable to gain their trust. The security man is held at gunpoint, whilst the larger heavy, Boris, telephones his cohorts to warn them that he is bringing Saunders to the hideout to be dealt with. A little later, Steed arrives at the pub, having recovered from his ordeal. He has found Saunders' scribbled notes detailing the trap he had set, and these notes have led Steed to the public house. The pub landlord remembers seeing two men, with a man matching Saunders' description. The three had left together. He also recalls the larger man made a telephone call and mentioned a local flour mill. Steed offers his thanks and decides to follow. Outside the mill, an armed guard named Peters is on patrol. Steed arrives and stealthily creeps up on the man and disarms him, knocking him unconscious. Steed enters the mill and, using the element of surprise, he is able to release Saunders. Steed holds Boris at gunpoint and tells him the group is finished, and that he wants to know who the saboteur at the centre is. Back at the laboratory, Dr. Reddington and Lisa have been checking their calculations for the project and have discovered a fatal mistake in one section. They will have to run one final test, with Susan's assistance. At the mill, Boris is being distinctly uncooperative, so Steed decides to employ rougher tactics. He grabs Boris's hand and forces it between two mill cogs. Steed threatens to turn the cogs and have them crush Boris's fingers. The conspirator doesn't believe that Steed is the sort of man to go through with such a threat, but as Steed moves the cogs, Boris cracks and cries out the name of the main saboteur, Susan Summers. Saunders calls the authorities to take the group into custody, then rushes back to the centre with Steed, unaware that Reddington and Lisa are commencing an experiment. At the centre, Reddington and Lisa are enjoying a quiet moment together in the office. She decides to go off to the laboratory and set up the experiment with Susan, while Reddington remains to finalise the paperwork. Steed and Saunders arrive shortly afterwards and inform Reddington of Susan's betrayal. Steed, realising that Lisa is in great danger, rushes off to the laboratory with Saunders. In the laboratory, Susan Summers watches Lisa through the visor of her radiation suit. The blonde scientist is setting up equipment, and Susan outstretches her arms to strangle Lisa. But Lisa is lucky. Steed and Saunders race in and pull Susan off her unwitting victim, dragging the struggling attacker out of the laboratory. The sabotage plan has been foiled, and the threat to national security has been neutralised.